Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with another weekly forecast. And this one is for Monday, January 7th, all the way through to Sunday, January 13th of 2019. And this week, there's another sort of chaotic week in the astrology. It's going to kind of be like this month with the eclipses that are actually quite intense. That we had one last week on Saturday on the 5th, and we have another one coming up on the 20th. And if you missed my my latest video where we talk about sort of the general overall energy in the mundane astrology with Robert Phoenix, go back and watch that because we get into a lot of detail and a lot of interesting information and some predictions about what's going to be coming up for us sort of as a whole with these energies here with the eclipses and the eclipse cycles for really the entire year. We talked about, because a lot of the energies that are coming in this month, last week, this week, and into next week are precursors or the first passes of energies that are going to be carried out throughout the entire year in 2019. So this month is a very big month for all of us because it's showing us really what we can expect and what energy we're working with, what the challenges are that we're going to be facing this year, and how we can best overcome these challenges. And so this week is, no exception to that. We have a lot of very interesting alignments showing up in the astrology. On Monday the 7th, we have Venus finally moving into the sign of Sagittarius. It's been going in and out of Scorpio for several months now because Venus was retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. And so we finally have a new fresh energy. Our relationships can become a little less intense. We can see our partnerships and our interactions with people from a more optimistic sort of outside perspective, from a higher vantage point. And so that's actually quite nice. The other things that are happening, though, are going to be a little bit more challenging potentially for some people. It really depends on how this is showing up in your chart. But for the mutable signs in particular and the cardinal signs, which is a lot of people, right? The mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, and the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And so all of these signs are going to be getting a little bit more of the turbulence, whereas the fixed signs are going to be a little less turbulent and a little less chaotic. We had a lot of really challenging fixed energy that occurred last year, and we're going to be having some more fixed energy with Uranus moving into Taurus in March. But right now, the fixed signs get a little bit of a break at least, and so it is going to be more focused on the mutables and the cardinals with the energy of this entire month, really. And so if you have a lot of mutable and cardinal energy in your chart, a lot of planets in those signs, you might be feeling this a little bit more so than other people. So going into Tuesday, we have the final square between Mercury and Mars. This has been coming on and off all throughout Mercury retrograde, and now it's occurring in different signs completely. It's happening in Capricorn and in Aries. And so we have this, square between Mercury and Mars that's happening, which can bring a lot of conflict through communication, a lot of really volatile communication. It can cause people to speak a little bit too directly, if that makes sense. So it can cause people to say things in a way that's maybe a little tactless or a little bit too blunt. And so this could be, a little bit of an issue for some people where, your words are not necessarily always going to be well received, especially with Mercury being in the sign of Capricorn. And it's going to be in a conjunction with Saturn this week as well. And so this is going to bring a lot of very heavy, very sort of cold almost communication, I would say. And so what you're saying might not come across in the way that you think that it will, especially if you're being really impacted by this energy, which we'll of course get into when we get into all 12 signs. And let me actually pull up the chart, because I've been doing that and people have been really liking seeing the chart for those who are students of astrology. This is the chart that I actually created here for, I pointed the right way this time. Look at that. This is the chart that I actually created for the square that's coming exact for the very first time between Jupiter and Neptune, which is happening on Sunday, actually. And so this is going to be a really powerful energy, and this is going to be an energy that will be waxing and waning, coming in and out all throughout 2019. So this is one of those predominant alignments that we're going to be dealing with. And so I thought it was important to sort of look at what's going on there. And you can see in this, you can't really see where my cursor is, but you can see there, and I can't put my hand on top of this either. You can see there, though, that there's a lot of square energy going on this week, right? We have squares forming between Mercury, like I said before, and Mars. And so that's going to be coming exact on Tuesday. And that, that's a time to really watch what you say, to make sure that you're coming across in a way that isn't too abrasive, and that you're, of course, with Mercury and Capricorn, we're thinking about things much more realistically. Our minds become much more down to earth. We're thinking more in terms of pragmatics, as opposed to with Mercury and Sagittarius, where it's been for the past couple of months because of the Mercury retrograde cycles, where we're thinking more expansively and optimistically and idealistically, and it can cause us to sort of miss the details. So now it's time to get back down to earth and to look at what's real and to become more realistic in our plans and goals for the future. But Mercury in Capricorn, especially when it's with Saturn, like it will be at the end of this week, can be very, first off, people are going to be saying more with less and not speaking necessarily unless they have something important to say with that Capricornian energy. But when they do have something important to say, it's going to feel very urgent, and people might be saying things and making decisions a little bit. Well, with that Saturn energy, it'll help with the impulse, but there's also that Uranus energy that's going on as well, because we're still in that orb of the station of Uranus to go direct as well. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to kind of to take into account here, and this is best looked at in terms of like a personal reading, because there's a lot, right? And so this is all going to be affecting everybody a little bit differently. But anyway. If you want to book a personal reading with me, you can do so at the link in the description below. But in terms of like the general astrology, this is a very tense and turbulent time period. We also have on Friday, the sun coming into a conjunction with Pluto, and Pluto is highly active because of the eclipses, right? Because we just had an eclipse, a solar eclipse that occurred in a conjunction with Saturn, and Pluto is right smack dab in the middle of those two planets, which are forming a conjunction for the very first time this year, also with the South Node included, and that'll be coming exact at the end of April, very intensely, while Pluto and Saturn are stationing to go retrograde. So this is a precursor to that energy that is going to be carried out in April, and then again during the eclipse cycles in June, July, August, well, June and July really this year. And yeah, so there's a lot going on here, but Sun conjunct Pluto can feel very intense. It can shed light on power struggles. It sheds light and brings up to the surface our deepest fears, wounds, vulnerabilities, and insecurities, so we can transform through these energies. And so we can create a better situation for ourselves moving forward that's more in alignment with our truth and our calling and our destiny and what we truly want, need, and desire in the area of life that's being affected by Pluto. And so this highlights the need for transformation in this area. We also have that Saturn activation with Mercury, right? So it's looking at what we're restructuring in the Capricorn area of our lives right now. And so that's another important component. And then we have the activation of the North and South nodes with the eclipses, and with the sun coming into a conjunction with the South node, coming into next week really, but it's already in that orb and it's being activated by the eclipses. And so that's another important and potent point, especially at the end of this week, because as you can see in this chart here for the weekend, when we have the Jupiter-Neptune square coming exact, there's the first quarter square of the moon in the sign of Aries, so it's being activated by the moon, this little stellium here. And so this is going to be a very highly charged, highly turbulent time period, especially at the end of this week. So Saturday, Sunday, into Monday and Tuesday of next week, there's a lot of energy going on there. It can feel quite intense. There's going to potentially be a lot of transformation going on in a lot of people's lives. And I'm already starting to see that with my friends and my clients and in, my own life and situation as well. There's a lot on the table, and there's a lot that's going to be transformed and worked through. And with the South Node being particularly active during this first half of the lunar cycle, there's going to be a lot of energy around letting go, surrender with that Pluto energy, right? Pluto also with the sun highlights what we need to surrender, let go of, transform, maybe something that we're holding on to that is past its expiration date, that we're holding on to because we have a psychological or emotional connection to this thing, or an addiction even, or an obsession, compulsion that we've been harboring for quite some time. And now it's time to let it go, and that's going to become very apparent what that thing is as we come into the end of this week. And the other things that are happening. So let's get into that Jupiter-Neptune square, because that's the big event, really. There's a lot of big events going on right now, but that's like a big one. So Jupiter in Sagittarius, of course, is a very optimistic, idealistic, It's a beautiful energy because Jupiter is at home in the sign of Sagittarius. It works well with that energy. It amplifies that energy of drive and ambition and adventure and exploration. And it gives us that sort of broader vantage point, that higher perspective on our lives. And so it does keep us optimistic. And it does keep us feeling good about what's going on, even when things get a little turbulent, even when there's a lot of Saturn activation like right now. What's happening, though, is that we have Jupiter in square with Neptune. Neptune is also a very idealistic planet. It's the planet that I always associate with wearing rose-colored glasses. So it's where we are very loving and very compassionate, but so much so that we might miss out on actually seeing what's really going on. And so we can become too idealistic and too off in the ethers. This is also an energy that Robert and I talked about, which is prone to escapism, through drugs, alcohol, even adventure, just wanting to disconnect from reality and do things that are fun and exciting and adventurous, or just to disconnect, just to get away from the day-to-day grind. And that's going to be amplified, right? When we have Jupiter in square with something, it's not the worst energy. In terms of squares, it's usually the nicest because it's Jupiter, it's the great benefic, right? And so even when it's in a difficult aspect, it's going to be doing something positive in one way or another. But Jupiter is a planet that just expands on everything it touches. And so when we have Jupiter in a challenging aspect with a planet like Neptune, it's expanding on the energy of Neptune. So it's expanding on idealism. It's expanding on illusion. It's expanding on fantasy. It's expanding on poisons, like we talked about in that video. It's expanding on drugs, alcohol, escapism through, use of substances. It's expanding on disconnection with reality just overall and in general. It also expands on creativity. It expands on compassion, and romanticism. And so it can make us much more compassionate, but when it's in a challenging aspect like this, there's more of a risk of being prone to martyrdom or playing the victim or playing on other people's guilt and feeling guilty and feeling overly obligated, because you're so compassionate and so loving during this time and you're seeing everything through this lens of love, compassion, empathy, and idealism. And so it makes you really want to give back. It makes you really want to share yourself with other people, and you can do it to the point where you're hurting yourself. And so especially for people who have really strong alignments with this energy, it's an important time to have good boundaries and to stay grounded in reality. That Saturn energy should help us to be able to do that to a certain extent, but this Neptunian energy can also be expanding on confusion and delusion and disillusionment, and so it can make it very difficult to navigate what's going on right now, especially if you have that strong activation in the mutable signs, and especially at the middle degrees of the mutable signs. And so we will, of course, get into that when we look at all 12 signs, but this is an energy that's going to be playing out for the entire year. And so this first pass of Jupiter square Neptune, it's giving us a little preview, right? It's like, pay attention to what's going on right now in the areas of life that are being impacted, which again, we'll talk about. And it'll give you an idea of the challenges that you'll be facing, where you're not going to be seeing things realistically, where you're going to be much more prone to laziness and indulgence and escapism, where you need to get grounded and where you need to be especially careful with your boundaries. That's going to be sort of the key word here with this Jupiter Neptune square is boundaries. It's going to bring up a lot of boundary issues. You're going to see people with it's expanding on that like looseness of boundaries. Neptune dissolves everything it touches. It's the boundaryless sort of planet, and it's like the opposite of Saturn, which is very rigid and regimented and has really strong, firm boundaries and structure, and it's very physical. Neptune is almost the exact opposite of that. It's very non-physical. It makes no sense in this reality. It doesn't have structure or form, and so it can be very confusing to deal with the energy of a difficult Neptune transit. And I'm probably going to be doing a webinar on Neptune later on this year because of this energy, just because I've dealt with a lot of Neptune energy that's difficult in my own chart and in my own life and with transits, even the ones that are going on right now. And so there are many tips and tricks that I could give for this Neptunian energy, far beyond the scope of what I could cover in this video right now. But it is a very strong energy. So, it's going to be affecting people in the mutable signs more so than other people. So that's going to be Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Gemini, like I mentioned before, and especially at those middle degrees, because this is happening at 14 degrees in these signs. And so if you have that energy, in those signs, this is maybe not the best time for decision making for you, right? Maybe this is not the best time to jump into something new, unless you also have a really strong Saturn activation happening at the same time to help ground you. But even then, you know, if it's affecting your Mercury or your Sun, you might not have a clear picture of what's going on. And especially during eclipse season, we never have a clear picture fully and completely of what's going on during the eclipses. We think we do, but you know, we're being guided by fate. We're being guided by something outside of our minds, right? And so now's a time when there could be a lot of changes. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't make changes. This just means that with Neptune being so active and with the nodes being so active, it's important to pay attention to the signs, synchronicities, your dreams, visions, impressions, any form of outside guidance, you know, your intuition that you utilize to navigate. That's going to be strengthened, and that's going to be where you're going to be able to find the right moves to make a lot more easily. And so I think that was pretty detailed, right? So we have a lot of craziness going on. But, you know, it's not without its benefits as well. You know, this is going to help us to release a lot of what needs to be released in our lives last week, this week, next week. Really, the whole month of January is a time of release, purge, letting go, restructuring. And, you know, this is a time when we're kind of looking at this idealistic energy as well, where we're looking at, you know, one thing you can use this Neptune energy for and this Jupiter energy for is really visualizing what it is that you want for the future, your biggest, most expansive, most beautiful long-term goals and plans. They might not be super realistic at this time, but you can see as far as you want to see, right? You can aim for the stars, but it's going to help you to see what the ideal is and what you're shooting for. And then Saturn and that energy, once you've gone through that point of release, because there's a lot you need to let go of before you can move into something new in any sort of situation, right? That's part of it. Anytime there's a new beginning, there's also an ending. You have to let go of something in order to make space for that new beginning. And this is part of that process. So this very first eclipse and this energy that's going on and being squared and triggered really heavily this week, the stellium in the sign of Capricorn, it's showing us what we need to let go of, and it's showing us the restructuring that we need to do in that area of our lives. And so there is a lot of strong Saturn. So I think the Jupiter squared to Neptune will help us to remain optimistic. It's just we might not be seeing things clearly and realistically. So that's my disclaimer of that. All right, and so let's get into the energy for all 12 signs. And before we do that, I just want to remind everyone, sometimes I forget to do this, but you know, this is best listened to for your rising sign first and your sun sign is secondary. This is because I use what's called a solar chart for these forecasts, as many astrologers do, which places the sun on the ascendant. So there's still going to be a lot of validity and accuracy to listening to your sun sign, but the ascendant sign is going to be more relatable to actual events. And of course, this is just a general forecast. It's always going to be more accurate if you get a real life reading where we're looking at your chart and the configurations and the way that the astrology is impacting you personally. And you can always do that. The link to book a reading with me is in the description of this video down below. And subscribe to my channel too. Subscribe to my channel, find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram. I just started doing Instagram, so I'm trying to work with that and figure that area out. And I've been posting astrology updates every single day, so you can keep up to date during this turbulent time on a day-to-day basis. You can be like, oh, I didn't realize that in this moment, this is when Jupiter is squaring Neptune exact, and all these crazy things are happening right now, right? And so, you can kind of keep up and keep track and make sense of what's going on a little bit more easily, hopefully, by following me on Instagram. Okay, so anyway, for Aries and for Aries Rising. All right, so for Aries and for Aries Rising, we have a few different things going on here. At the start of this week, you're going to be having Mars, which will be between 4 and 5 degrees in the sign of Aries at this time, which will be coming into, Mercury will be coming into a square with Mars. And so this could bring some sort of conflict or turbulence or difficult communication as it relates to your work, your career, and your public reputation, which is an area where you're undergoing a lot of potentially stress, turbulence, transformation, and upheaval over the course of this month. There could just simply be a sense that something is coming and something is happening and something needs to give. The pressure's on, it feels quite intense, it feels quite heavy in this area of life, and maybe you need to express that to somebody. Just make sure that you're choosing your words wisely and you're not coming across in a way that's going to be harsh or abrasive, or that's going to rattle someone's cage in a way that's going to be detrimental to you in the long run, especially when it comes to people in positions of power and authority. With Pluto in Capricorn, you're transforming your relationship with your work and your career and what it is that you're doing out in the world. And the sun is highlighting this. So it's highlighting maybe where you need to surrender control, maybe where you need to surrender a position of power and authority, or maybe you need to surrender a relationship with somebody in a position of power and authority. So it's highlighting power and control issues in the workplace, in your career. This could also be highlighting your need to come more into prominence, into a position of power, but you need to surrender something first. Maybe it's fears, anxieties. Maybe there's a little bit of restructuring. You need to set a solid foundation for that first with Saturn, but there is a need to sort of transform that area of your life, to not sort of transform, but actually very much transform that area of life with all of this energy going on here. And so you might be feeling the weight of pressure in your career, and this square that's happening on Monday and also on Sunday with the moon highlighting this as well, it's going to really be putting this into focus, and it could feel quite tense, especially if you have Aries Sun, Moon, Rising at that 4 to 5 degrees. So I would say between 3 and 6 degrees, you'll be feeling this with the Mars square very intensely on Tuesday. And then as we get into the weekend, you'll be feeling it more intensely at that around that 12th degree, where the Saturn Mercury conjunction will be coming exact. And so anywhere from 10 to 14 degrees, you'll be feeling that really intensely. And then also at that 21st degree, which is where Pluto and the Sun are coming exact. So again, that's going to be really anywhere from 19 to 23 degrees. So this is a lot. Pretty much anyone in Aries will be feeling this energy to a certain extent, but the most intense will be those degrees that I was just talking about. And there's a conflict between your identity and the way that you're showing up in the world and the way that you want to pursue your own self-interest and what's being demanded of you out in the world with your career. The Jupiter-Neptune square is occurring in your 9th and in your 12th house. And so this might be you having some very idealistic sort of beliefs about this reality, your philosophies, your morals, your ethical values. You might feel like you're living up to that potential and you're in alignment with your integrity, but you might find out that that's all an illusion and that you are sort of kidding yourself in that area. And that might be part of the conflict that's going on with your work as well. Is your work in alignment with your integrity? Is it in alignment with what you truly want, need, and desire in life? Because that's Pluto, right? What do you need to transform and restructure to merge that energy of your ethical values, your moral values, your belief system, some sort of higher connection, higher knowledge, higher wisdom with the work that you're doing out in the world. But this is a really good time for you to explore different modalities of thinking, different belief systems, especially spiritual belief systems and spiritual practices, to expand your mind through different forms of education, especially education that's more spiritual and boundless and something where you're learning through experience, that type of thing, as long as you're not erring too much on the end of escapism. So this could even bring a need to, or a feeling like you want to break free from reality by going on a big crazy trip and just leaving everything behind, ditching all of your work responsibilities this weekend. And that's great, but you have a lot to take care of in that area. So you might create a mess by doing that. So finding the balance between escaping and looking at things from a different perspective and actually doing the work that needs to be done, that's going to be the challenge for Aries this week. All right. And for Taurus Rising, this challenging energy is coming from your 12th house and into your 9th house, which is the house of beliefs. It's the house of higher wisdom. It's the house of higher education. It's the house of adventure and things that you learn through experience. And so with this energy occurring in your 12th house and in your 9th house, this is going to be a challenge of your beliefs. This is going to really cause you to have to look at, in a very intense way, any sort of maladaptive beliefs that aren't serving you as it relates to your framework for reality, moral and ethical values. It can look at where you've maybe used and abused your power, and maybe your beliefs about power and control need to change. This is a huge transformation and restructuring of the area of your life that has to do with what you believe and why you believe it, your philosophies that drive you, right, in terms of the way that you relate with everyday reality. There could be a challenge actually that's posed from an outside source. So whenever you have 12th house activation, the 12th house is a house that's hidden away from the world. And with Mars being a part of this, it could very well be that there's a hidden enemy or a hidden influence that's working against you behind the scenes that causes you to have to look at yourself, have to look at your integrity, have to look at your beliefs. There could also be an energy where you feel like you have to, there could be a very intense, sort of strenuous energy going on involving people in foreign countries, people in foreign lands, travel, especially long distance travel. Or there's some sort of challenge or difficulty there. So if you're traveling this week, I would say, exercise caution and take your time, because there might be a tendency to rush through things and there might be some challenges that you might face. That's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's just something that you need to pay attention to and to look at. And whatever frustration that you're enduring in that area of your life is showing you something about what you need to change and what you need to transform and what you need to restructure and what you truly want, need, and desire in terms of your education, your higher connections to God and the universe, and whatever it is that you utilize as the framework for what's going on here. And then need to let go of old, rigid, dogmatic beliefs, right? That's the ninth house. And so you're going to be able to see where your beliefs are working against you very clearly, I would say, this week. The other thing that's happening is that you have Jupiter in your 8th house, which is expanding on, it's very empowering. This is a deeply healing transit. It helps you to heal through old wounds, baggage, insecurities quite easily over the course of this next year. But this is in square with Neptune. And so there could be some sort of something going on beneath the surface in terms of your friendships, your relationships, where maybe you've allowed yourself to be walked all over. Maybe you've allowed yourself to become overly obligated for other people's stuff. There could be boundary issues going on in this area. And this could be you wanting to escape through drugs, alcohol, addiction, compulsion, some sort of fantasy or illusion within your social circle. And, that might not be the best thing to do right now because you're already not seeing things very clearly. You're already not very lucid in that area. And so that's just something to kind of pay attention to. But this is a time when you can really hone in on your ideals when it comes to your finances, your ideals when it comes to your joint finances, your investments, debt, taxes, other people's money, inheritance. Those are all things that are associated with the 8th house. This could be where you look at what you want and get that sort of optimistic outside vantage point when it comes to your social circle. Who are you connecting with? Are these the right people? Are they a good influence on you, or are there power struggles? Are there issues going on beneath the surface that you've been ignoring? So looking at those things and figuring out what you truly want in this area, because you'll be able to manifest this by the end of the year, right? And so that's for Taurus and for Taurus Rising. All right. And then for Gemini and for Gemini Rising, this energy is happening in your 11th and in your 8th house with the Mars square to with the Mercury square to Mars, the Mercury conjunction to Saturn, the Pluto conjunction to the sun. This is all happening in this area of your chart and of your life. And so there could be some sort of power struggle or some sort of conflict that comes through communication with groups of people, with your social networks, with your friends, with people that you surround yourself with by choice. And so there could be a disruption, a dispute, some sort of conflict that comes at the start of this week in particular, and really even into the weekend. That's a potential. When you're dealing with a stellium like this, with Pluto and Saturn in the South Node involved in the 8th house, this is the house of death and rebirth. It's the house of transformation. It's the house of deep healing of wounds and insecurities and repressed energy, where you're pulling it up and dredging it up and you're healing yourself from the inside out. And so this could be a very intense process for you this week, because it's really being triggered and activated. And it could be triggered by a situation involving your friends, involving a social network, involving the internet even. And so, if you find yourself feeling very intense, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by this energy, it might be best to sort of take a step back and to not be so directly involved in what's going on in the outside world, what's going on with social media, what's going on with your friends, because you're going through a very deep internal process of transformation. You're restructuring this area of your life. This could also bring up issues involving debt, taxes, inheritance, other people's money. That could be quite challenging, where you need to let go of an old way of dealing with this in order to move into something new. It can definitely bring up power struggles involving money and resources, with Pluto being highlighted in this area, and with Saturn and Mercury there as well. There might be some tough conversations that you might be having this week overall and just in general. And so this is a week to sort of be a little bit more low-key because this is a lot of inner work that you're doing. And so that's part of the process that's going on here. Where you might find a little bit of solace and reprieve would be the area of the 7th house and the 10th house. But at the same time, this is sort of a challenging energy because you are a Gemini. This is a mutable sign. And so especially if you have your sun, moon, rising, especially your rising, around that 14th degree in Gemini. So anywhere from 12 to 16 degrees, we'll be feeling this very intensely with a T-square forming, right, between your sun and your rising or whatever it is that is in Gemini. And so this could bring sort of it could bring an enhanced optimism and idealism and just feeling really good about your relationships, especially business partnerships and work-related relationships, but relationships in general, feeling more optimistic and expansive about yourself and your place in the world and what it is that you want to create based on your own self-interest moving forward. But this is also an energy of feeling like maybe a little bit tired, a little bit depleted, not wanting to deal with reality, being confused about what direction to take. That could be part of it as well. Seeing a lot of different potentials and a lot of different perspectives and seeing how wonderful all of these things might be, but not knowing how to ground that energy or what choice to make. Also with Neptune, especially again, if you have between 12 and 16 degrees, your rising sign, your sun sign, or any of your personal planets really, there can sometimes be this sort of ominous energy where it feels like something's about to happen and it's sort of like this free-floating anxiety and then nothing actually comes to pass. And so that is something that's very common with these types of transits, and you might be experiencing that as well. But just know that that'll pass. Aspen is a really good Bach flower remedy for that, if that's something that you're interested in and open to. If you're feeling that free-floating anxiety where it's coming from somewhere outside of you, that's, a good remedy to lean on and to look at. But for the most part, this is a place, so the area where you can find solace and where things might feel a little bit better for you will probably be in your relationships. So finding a way to connect with people one-on-one in a very personal, close way, connecting with your partner, connecting with a close friend, a close relative, something like that, that can actually be quite nice. There's going to be there's an energy around deception and disillusionment that could be highlighted and expanded on in terms of your career. And so it's not a good time to launch something in that area. But yeah, overall, so it's a tricky energy for everyone, but especially the mutables and especially the cardinals, and that's just how it's going to be this week. So that's Gemini and Gemini rising. All right, for Cancer and for Cancer rising. Okay, so for Cancer and for Cancer rising, this is actually happening. So the square is happening between your 7th house and your 10th house. And so there could be some sort of challenge to your relationships that stems from your career, your public reputation, or there could be an argument or a dispute with business partnerships or close relationships in the workplace with bosses or employers. And so just tread lightly if you can. There might be something that you need to confront somebody about as it relates to a relationship. You might feel like you need to confront your spouse or somebody close to you about something, and you need to take some sort of action, maybe in that area, to restructure that area of your life or to reignite passions or to heal through old wounds or old vulnerabilities, insecurities in that area. And that might be triggered this week as well. But there is a connection to your work, your career, your public reputation, or your public status, right? Changes in relationship status traditionally are associated with transits to the midheaven and 10th house, because that changes your public status, especially marital status. So maybe, this is compelling you to, with Saturn there, lay down roots to re-solidify or to, for the first time, solidify your commitment within a partnership. But maybe there's challenges in doing that. With Saturn being activated here, you are going through a restructuring of your relationships, and that's not just romantic partnerships, that's all close personal relationships. You might find yourself over the next month really letting go of a lot of connections that, karmically it's time to let go of, right? When we're talking about the South Node, we're talking about letting go of karma from the past, of past life associations, of things that no longer serve us in this lifetime and no longer serve our path. And so, in this case, these are relationships. Also, there could be power struggles and power and control issues that come up and that are highlighted in relationship. But this is also a period with Pluto there of deep healing and deep transformation. This is where, Cancer rising people are really figuring out what they truly want, need, and desire in relationships. And so that way, moving forward, you have better, more intimate, more deeply connected, more satisfying relationships in the future. the other things that are happening here, and this could be like I think I just said this, but letting go of relationships that are not good for you. That could be a very common theme for Cancer Rising, where you see people having a lot of fallout, in that area, and also letting go of business partnerships and work-related relationships that are not serving you as well. Contracts that maybe need to be broken that you've been holding on to, or psychological or emotional connections in relationship that are past their expiration date that you really need to let go of, but you've been suffering through it because you have that really strong emotional bond or that psychological connection to that person or that situation. But with Jupiter, so Jupiter is actually going to be coming into a square with Neptune in your ninth house of beliefs. And so, Jupiter in the sixth house is expanding on your work, it's expanding on your health, it's expanding on a lot of really positive energy there. And so this is the time when you're going to be thinking very optimistically and very expansively about your career, your work, what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're going to have big, grandiose visions for the future and what it is that you want to create for yourself, even amidst a little bit of turbulence in your career and potentially, in your relationships. So it's kind of like an energy where if there's something unraveling for you in relationships right now or in contracts or business agreements, you're going to be able to see the perspective and the potential of what you can build from that sort of rubble when everything is said and done, and when you've released what you needed to release, how you can restructure that area, and what you can create for yourself in terms of better daily routines, better work habits, better workplace situations, better interactions with coworkers. All of that, is in the sixth house. And this could also be you looking at your beliefs about your health and where maybe you're kidding yourself and maybe you need to look at things more realistically and have better boundaries and have better structure to your day-to-day health routines, or maybe where you need to sort of become more optimistic in that area if you've been struggling, right? And so this can help you in that way. It's a challenge to look at the potential, to pay less attention to what's going on in the here and now and what the possibilities are in this area of your life. All right, and so for Leo and for Leo Rising, let's put that away. All right, so for Leo and for Leo Rising, I'll put that right there. There we go. Now I have more space. So for Leo and for Leo Rising, this energy is happening between your 6th and your 9th house. And so there could be some sort of conflict between your beliefs, your integrity, your ideals, and what it is that you're being sort of challenged to do in your work on a day-to-day basis. This could even be like an unexpected opportunity to travel for your work, but it's going to be a challenging opportunity, and you might not be as excited about it as you normally would be because there's a lot of challenge there and there's a lot of sort of tense energy going on in that area. But you're going through a complete restructuring of your work, your day-to-day work routines, your health habits and routines, your relationship with your coworkers, your relationship with your workspace, and what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis to make up the bigger picture of your career. And that could be what's being challenged right now, or the challenge to this area is going to be your beliefs. It's going to be your ethical, moral values, your philosophies on life. It's going to be your integrity. And so there could be some situation that comes up that challenges your integrity, and it could have to do with your work or your relationships with your coworkers or something that you're being asked to do. Somebody may be exercising, flexing their power and control, over you and trying to force you into doing something, because there is potential for power struggles in the workplace right now, and power dynamics in the workplace that are very toxic and difficult and not good for you moving forward. That's going to come to light, and you're going to be able to see that a lot more easily this week, so you can work through it with a greater understanding of what's really going on. The other thing too is with the Sun conjunct Pluto in your 6th house of work and of health, it's going to show you what you truly need, want, and desire on a deep and intense level, what you really connect to and what you're really passionate about in your work. And it's going to show you the truth of what you need to work through potentially on that psycho-emotional level in order to find true healing on the physical realm, right, in the physical body, or what you've been neglecting or ignoring because you have sort of a psychological or emotional attachment to a certain way of behaving. Maybe you have like a food addiction or an attachment to a certain health regime that you're really intense about, and you're like, this is working for me, this has to work, all the blogs say it's the greatest thing, and maybe you're just doing yourself more harm than good. So looking at those types of habits and things that you're really stuck on and fixated on, that might not actually be as good for you as you think it is. The other thing that's going on here is that Jupiter is in your 5th house, which is the house of romance, and it's squaring Neptune in the 8th house, which is the house of deep transformation from the inside out, power and control issues, joint finances. And so there could be, some sort of idealistic or some sort of like fantasy or unrealistic expectation that you have for a romantic partnership, for a relationship with children, for some sort of child support type of situation with children. You might have an unrealistic expectation for the money that you're creating through investments or from an outside source. But this could also be a good time for you to sort of fantasize a little bit and utilize this energy very creatively and very intuitively to visualize your future, in terms of romance, to do something fun where you're disconnecting by doing something that you truly love to do. And that's actually going to facilitate some deeper inner work through that 8th house connection. And so there's a lot that you can do with this energy here, but thinking about just sort of reflecting on and visualizing what you want for the future in terms of your finances, in terms of your passions and your hobbies, and the time that you'll have to actually engage your inner child and do the things that you love to do, or your relationship with your children, that type of thing. Any power and control issues involving your children that you might be wearing rose-colored glasses on, maybe you can work to see it more realistically, or maybe you can use this energy to sort of fantasize and visualize a better future moving forward. All right, so Virgo and Virgo Rising. All right, so this energy is happening in your, let's see here. So we have this square that's going on. Is this correct here? Yeah. Okay, so you have this square that's going on here with Mars and Mercury, and then we have the Saturn activation and the Pluto Sun activation. This is all happening in your 5th house of romance. And so this could bring a particularly turbulent period romantically, if you're romantically involved in a relationship that isn't necessarily serious, or like a marriage partnership or something like that. The 5th house is the house of love affairs, less serious relationships, flings, boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, that type of thing. And so there could be some turbulence in the area of romance that comes for you this week. And that could, the turbulence could stem from power and control issues, your deep-seated fears and insecurities that are coming out, your vulnerabilities, and your obsessions and compulsions, and maybe jealousy that is sort of rearing its ugly head this week. This could also come from issues involving joint finances and money issues, right? Involving your partner, or involving romance, or involving your children as well, because that's part of this, right? Because this is the 5th house. The 5th house is the house of children. There could be power and control issues in terms of your romantic life. There could be issues with the Sun conjunct Pluto, where you're really trying to figure out what you truly want, need, and desire in romance, where you're figuring out what you want, need, and desire in terms of your ability to connect with your inner child and to do the things that you're passionate about. This is really going to ignite your passions in this area and show you where you're going to need to do that Saturnian restructuring in order to create a better foundation to engage in the things that you love to do moving forward. There's also a need to surrender something in this area that's been triggered. We talked about this last week, but it's continuing to be triggered in this 5th house area. And so this could be letting go of an old romance, or an old attachment to an old romance, or an attachment to a certain way of behaving and structuring your time with your children. Or, letting go of something that's preventing you from enjoying yourself fully out in the world, from embracing your own, creative self-expression and taking that and turning it into something practical, because that's really what Saturn does. It restricts and limits your ability to enjoy yourself a little bit when you have Saturn in the 5th house, because it's trying to show you how you can utilize your talents, your gifts, your passions in a way that favors the current structures and paradigms that where you can utilize it for something for work or something else of that nature. So structuring time for yourself to do things that you love to do, but enjoyment and play can feel like a lot more work with this Saturn activation and energy. Romance can feel like a lot more work. Children can feel like a lot more work. It's just sort of the nature of this energy. The other thing that Virgos have going on is this square going on here between Jupiter and Neptune. So especially if you have your Virgo Sun, Moon, Rising around that 14th degree in Virgo, because this is a mutable sign, so I would say anywhere from 12 to 16 degrees again, you're going to be feeling this the most, and you're going to be feeling this on and off all year long. And so this is going to be an energy of really, first off, it's going to be a very escapist energy when you have Jupiter and Neptune in square with your Sun, Moon, Rising. And so it's an energy of just not wanting to do the work, not wanting to do what you need to do, not knowing what to do or what direction to take, feeling confused about your relationships if you're a Virgo Rising, feeling confused about the interactions that occur, having sort of a fantasy about the direction that you want to take, but not really having a specific direction or a specific way of carrying out these fantasies and these goals. And so this is a good time to visualize and to sit in your energy and to intuit what comes next, but not to necessarily take action, because there is that level of confusion. Or not to kid yourself, right? Because especially in relationships, you might be wearing rose-colored glasses, especially for Virgo risings, and and it also as it relates to your home, your family, your property. So you might have some sort of fantasy about the way that you want things to be with your family and with your partner. And, it might be a little too over the top, too idealistic. Your partner might not be on board, but you might be just thinking and fantasizing that this is all going to come to pass. And so making sure that you're having very grounded, open and honest communication with your partner. This could also bring up boundary issues in relationships that you might need to address this week. All of these things are a potential. So for Virgo Rising, this is a very ungrounding energy. This is an energy where you might feel that sort of ominous, free-floating anxiety. Again, just like I said for Gemini, aspen Bach flower remedy is really great for that, especially with Neptune's involved. And it can help to sort of ground that energy, bring it back down to earth, so you don't feel that sort of sense of shiftiness and like something's going on in the ethers and then nothing actually happens. And if you're feeling, you might just be feeling very idealistic and very optimistic about your future, but just not knowing what steps to take to bring that idealistic vision into reality, right? And that would be a really great way. So thinking about what you want to expand on in your home, your family, your property, your place of living, thinking about what you want to, the way that you want to engage in relationship moving forward, right? Those types of things. That would be a good way to utilize this energy. All right. And then for Libra and for Libra Rising, pull that up. There we go. So for Libra and for Libra Rising, this activation here of Mars with the moon and squaring off to the sun and Pluto and Mercury and Saturn and the South Node and all of that in your 4th house, this is happening in your 7th house. So there could be a conflict in your relationships or in some sort of contractual agreement as it relates to your home, your family, your property. There could be disagreements with your spouse, power and control issues with your family. But this is really going to show you what you need to restructure in the area of your home life moving forward in order to create a better foundation for yourself. There could be some difficult conversations that you have to have, some challenging information that comes through involving a relationship or involving your family members. There could be, like I said, power and control and power struggle issues involving your home or something involving property. This also is going to show you, with Pluto being activated with the sun, what you truly want, need, and desire as it relates to your roots. And so do you want to have children? Do you want to start a family? Do you want to have your own home? Where do you want to live? What type of place is going to be most satisfying for you? And who do you want to surround you in these places? These are all the questions that might be bubbling up. This is also going to highlight with Pluto in the 4th house, right? The 4th house is the house of your early childhood experience. This is going to highlight any deep wounds, vulnerabilities, traumas, difficult, intense situations from your childhood that maybe you haven't dealt with and that are being drudged up in a different way right now, or just being brought up to the surface from like the depths of your unconscious, and you have to address it, you have to look at it, you have to work through it, but you'll be able to see it very clearly this week, and you'll be able to utilize and deal with that energy. This could also be you taking back control of your family if things have gotten out of hand and unruly, taking back control and power within the family dynamic, taking control of your immediate environment through your home, through your property, through your resources. But there's also a need to surrender something here. There's a need to empower yourself on one hand, but also to surrender what no longer serves you as it relates to your home and your family. What are you holding on to in these areas? Just because you have this like sort of psychological attachment to it when it really has served its purpose and it's past its expiration date. So maybe that's a place of living. Maybe you need to move and you've just been holding on to this place because you feel like it's, you have an attachment to it for one reason or another, even though it's not necessarily working for you anymore. Maybe it's a family dynamic. Maybe it's a relationship with a family member. Maybe it's a certain way of behaving and structuring your home life. So thinking about those things. And then the other thing that's going on, and this is, oh, by the way, so if you're a Libra rising, this is going to be affecting you most intensely, or more intensely than some of the other signs, because this is happening in the cardinal signs and it's spanning so many degrees in the sign of Capricorn. So at the start of this week, especially if you have your Libra sun, moon, rising at that 4 to 5 degrees, so really anywhere from like, let's say 3 to 6 degrees in the sign of Libra, you're going to be feeling that challenge to your relationship, that conflict more so than other people might. And then as we get into later in the week on Friday, that Pluto conjunction to the sun, which that's really active all week, but especially Wednesday through Sunday, you'll be feeling that the most. So anywhere from 10 to 14 degrees in the sign of Libra, you'll be feeling that power struggle, that intensity, that need to transform. That's also you transforming your relationships and transforming your identity out in the world in a way that can feel a little bit like a crisis, like an identity crisis. And that's going to be highlighted. Or not 12 degrees, 21 degrees, sorry. That's happening at 21 degrees in Capricorn. So anyone not between 10 and, I don't know why I said that. I have it upside down here on my thing and I know what degree it's at. But anyway, so anyone from 19 to 22 degrees in the sign of Libra will be feeling that activation at the end of this week, very much so. And then you're also going to be having that activation between Mercury and Saturn at 12 degrees. So that's where that's occurring. And that's going to be happening this weekend as well. And then we have the South Node. So pretty much anyone who has a Libra rising is going to be impacted by this very intensely, but especially at those specific degrees, you'll be feeling it the most. All right. And then for Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, there we go. Move that a little bit. For Scorpio and for Scorpio rising, this energy with this square and all this cardinal energy is happening in the area of your work, your day-to-day routines, your health. It's also impacting your day-to-day communication, short-distance travel, your relationship with your siblings, your community, your thought processes, where they could be challenged in some sort of way. With Mercury conjunct Saturn, you might find that your thoughts are a little bit slower, or that you're meeting frustration when it comes to creating new ideas and plans. With Pluto coming into conjunction with the Sun, you might have some very intense communication coming in this week, where you have to sort of look at that, right? This is also you looking at transforming the third house area of life. So transforming yourself and your situation, especially as it relates to your work, because there's a conflict there. There could be some really intense communication coming in through your coworkers, through your work-related communications that are very disruptive, that are very harsh, that are very difficult. Conflict that could come in that area, or involving your health or your health routines or your mindset around your health. That is all potential, especially at the start of this week. But really what we're looking at here is a huge restructuring and transformation of the way that you think on a day-to-day basis, the way that you communicate with other people on a day-to-day basis, your marketing plans, your education, your training, or if you're teaching or writing or doing something like that, restructuring that area of your life so you can be much more efficient, much more effective, and looking at what you're passionate about in terms of pursuing new ideas and new education, and really aligning yourself with those passions, because the Sun conjunct Pluto is really going to highlight what you need, want, and desire as it relates to your passions. Luckily for Scorpio, this Pluto conjunction and a lot of this that's going on here in the third house is actually going to be in a really nice sextile with the ascendant and a nice trine with the descendant. And so if you have your Sun, Moon, Rising with the Saturn conjunction to Mercury, if you have your Sun, Moon, Rising between 10 and 14 degrees in the sign of Scorpio, this could really bring a really important communication or some sort of agreement or contract that's settled involving relationships, involving business partnerships, involving some sort of marketing campaign, involving like a book deal or an educational pursuit. This could bring really grounded, very pragmatic communication in your relationships, especially into this weekend. If you have your Sun, Moon, Rising at that 21st degree in Scorpio, so especially rising sign 21st degree Scorpio, so anywhere from 20 to 22 degrees, you're going to be feeling this highlight with the Sun and Pluto very intensely, but in a positive way. It's helping you to transform your identity out in the world. It's helping you to look at what you truly want, need, and desire in your relationships in order to have better, more empowered, more deeply connected relationships moving forward, and what you need in terms of communication around those relationships. This is This is also you needing to let go of something in terms of an idea, a mindset, a way of thinking and behaving. This is also maybe you needing to let go of a certain connection in your community or with your siblings or extended family members that's no longer serving you, that you've been holding on to because of an attachment to it psychologically or emotionally, even though it's past its expiration date. This could also be you needing to let go of some sort of plans or something that you've been holding on to in terms of higher or educational pursuits and learning or teaching or something along those lines as well. But this is going to be a restructuring of your thought processes and a restructuring of the way that you view the world on a day-to-day basis. This is letting go of negative self-talk as well. Anything that's restricting and limiting you based on the way that you analyze your life on a day-to-day basis, letting go of that and becoming more empowered through that process. The other thing that's going on here is that you have Jupiter in the sign of Sagittarius in your second house, and this is actually going to be in square with Neptune, which is in your fifth house, which is the house of romance, of play, of the things that you love to do. I would say that Jupiter in the second house usually indicates that you won't be without, so there's not a huge risk in that respect, but there is a risk of overindulgence. So overindulging, in spending, right? Overindulging in utilizing your finances a little too much so, buying things that are luxurious, having loose boundaries with money. That is sort of the potential difficulty here. This is also a time when you can really reflect on, and you're being challenged to connect your hobbies, your interests, the things that you love to do, your spiritual passions and pastimes with the work that you're doing out in the world, and with the way that you create money and resources for yourself. You might find yourself wanting to spend a lot of money on your passions and hobbies and pastimes and romance and going out and playing and all of that. But you might overindulge and you might overdo it, and then you're going to be left with a little bit of a mess when you have this moment of disillusionment where you're like, wow, I thought I had this all together. I thought I had plenty of money to do this, and then look what I did, right? So just exercising caution, having good boundaries, not overspending, not giving people, loans and things like that frivolously, just making sure that you have a good handle on your finances this week. And you're not being overly idealistic about what you can accomplish financially as well, being more realistic about your goals and plans so that you can actually carry them out, because you're really setting yourself up for this foundation of growth in the second house for the next 12-year cycle of Jupiter. All right. And then for Sagittarius and Sagittarius Rising. So this energy is happening. So first off, you have this conjunction or this little stellium that's forming in your second house of finances. And so this is a complete restructuring of the financial area of your life where you're undergoing a major change and transformation in the way that you create resources for yourself and the way that you deal with finances. With Pluto being highlighted in this area, you could also have... You could also come into money through an outside source, through inheritance, through other people's money, through joint finances, through marriage. And so that is something that could be highlighted, but there could also be power struggles involving resources, that type of thing. Although I would say that because the North Node is also transiting your 8th house, that, this could be a time period where if you're in a relationship, more money can come in through the outside. But if you have any debts, they're going to come up and they're going to be highlighted this week. So you're going to have to look at that and, make a plan and make sure that you're dealing with that more appropriately. This is you really having to restructure the area of your money and your resources in the way that you create them, and having to let go of a way of creating resources for yourself that is way past its expiration date, that's no longer serving you moving forwards. That way you can move into something new, more beautiful, more powerful, maybe relying more on a partner's resources instead of your own efforts and your own hard work, even if that feels uncomfortable to you because you have this responsible Capricornian second house, right? That could be part of it too. There could be a conflict that stems from the area of the 5th house. And so this could be a conflict from a romantic partner, a conflict involving children, a conflict involving play, and maybe wanting to do something really fun, but not having the resources because, Saturn's involved in the 2nd house to be able to do that, because maybe you're paying off debts or maybe you're working on releasing ties to past debts or past financial obligations with the South Node in your 2nd house. The other thing that's going on is that there's going to be this really intense square going on here between Neptune in your 4th house and Jupiter in your 1st house. And so especially for Sagittarius rising and Sagittarius sun sign people who have their rising or their sun around that 14th degree in the sign of Sagittarius, so anywhere between 12 and 16 degrees will be feeling this the most. There could be you could be feeling overly idealistic about your future and your future goals and plans, whatever it is that you want to do with your own self-interest, some sort of goal or aspiration involving your home, your family, your property, or your relationships. And so there could be this like idealism and this fantasy about what you want to create, but there could be a difficulty in understanding how you're going to create that for yourself. There could also be an area where you're not seeing things clearly, where you're kidding yourself or lying to yourself, or you're wearing rose-colored glasses in these situations, thinking that you're going to create something really magical, but not really understanding that there's something else going on behind the scenes that's not going to work for you, or not being able to focus and plan for the details of this. And so that's something to kind of pay attention to. Definitely Sagittarius, just like Virgo and Gemini, is a sign where there's going to be potential there, especially near that 14th degree, for escapism through drugs, alcohol, fantasy, not wanting to work, not wanting to, deal with the physical realm and the physical reality, even though you're really being called to with all of this energy in your second house, right? So you have to deal with your finances. You have to deal with making money and dealing with your resources and balancing your budget and letting go of debts and financial obligations and ways of utilizing your resources that are just not working for you anymore. And so that's an area where you have to focus on the physical reality right now. But this is a very transcendent, non-physical. You might want to escape into the woo-woo. You might want to, look at different philosophies and spend time just sort of contemplating and taking time away from the world, or escaping through drugs or alcohol, or through taking a trip or something like that, which can be fine as long as you do it in moderation, right? It's all about moderation, because this is an energy of overdoing things in this area, potentially. But yeah, this would also be a really great time to fantasize and visualize what it is that you want personally, for your own personal motivations, your own personal self-expression, your own self-interest. It could be a good time to fantasize about what you want and create sort of an image around your home, your family, your property for the future, your relationships as well. So that's where there's an energy of fantasy, illusion, but also really being able to visualize something and maybe manifesting it later on when there's a little bit more grounded energy. All right, Capricorn and Capricorn Rising. So for Capricorn and Capricorn Rising, the stellium here is happening in your first house, which is the house of you. So Capricorns are going to be feeling this really intensely, more so than a lot of the other signs, because you're having all of this energy in your first house. And so this is impacting you in all areas of life. So for people who have their sun, moon, rising near the 4th and 5th degree, you're going to be having some sort of challenging communication potentially coming in, involving your home, family, property, involving you, coming from your family, directed toward you, where there's some sort of aggravation or irritation or conflict. You have this conjunction here between Mercury and Saturn, which will be happening in your first house as well. And so sun, moon, rising people who have, their planets between 10 and 14 degrees in the sign of Capricorn will be feeling that burden of responsibility. It's going to become much more apparent, but you're going to be able to really, so this is one of the things that's going on here, because you've had Saturn already transiting through your first house. It started in December of 2017 and it's still going for a while. So you've already been doing some work on yourself. You've been restructuring your identity out in the world. You've been rebuilding your life in a lot of ways. And so, this is a really important process that you're going through, and it can be very rewarding, even if it does feel like a lot of work at the time. Mercury is coming into a conjunction with Saturn. Mercury is the mind, it's the intelligence, it's your analytical thought processes. And so this is going to help you to be able to really rationalize what's going on, to make really incredible plans for the future, to sort of ground that energy into very detailed, very realistic goals and plans moving forward, especially, as they relate to your home, your family, your property. You might be thinking about making some sort of move or renovation or changing something with your family dynamic. And so this can really help you to plan things out. And then Pluto conjunct the sun is going to bring up the need to transform your identity out in the world. This is a deeply empowering aspect that's going on, where you're transforming from the inside out. This is a deep healing process where you're really getting to know yourself on the deepest, most inner level, and you're going to be able to connect what you're finding with the way that you express yourself out in the world, which can be a very empowering and very important process. So this is you really connecting with your deepest needs and desires, with who you truly are on the inside, and expressing that out in the world, and this is being highlighted. But this is also a major transformation and restructuring of all areas of your life. So you might be going through changes in your relationships. You might be going through changes in your home, in your family dynamic. You might be going through changes in your career. And there might be a combination of, really positive, empowering energy there, but also struggle and difficulty and challenge. And all of that's being highlighted right now. What is really being highlighted is the need to surrender a certain way of behaving, a certain way of expressing yourself out in the world in order to make space for these changes. So maybe you're really rigid and dogmatic in your beliefs about yourself and who you are out in the world, and that needs to change so that way you can show up in a way that's more in alignment with who you truly are and what you came here to do. Maybe your relationships are part of that as well. Maybe you're focusing too much on your own needs and self-interest because there's so much energy there, and you need to release that and focus more on your partner's needs, right? These are all different potentials. The other thing that's going on is that you have Neptune in your 3rd house squaring Jupiter in the 12th house. This is just, this isn't necessarily the worst placement for this. This is a really great energy for visualizing, for fantasizing, for dreams and doing dream work, for journeying, that type of thing. As long as you're not escaping into drugs, as long as you're not escaping completely from reality and disconnecting yourself completely, this can be utilized to really help you to gain a deeper insight and a deeper knowledge and wisdom, because you can combine that energy of the 3rd house, which is involving the mind and communication and thought processes, with the energy of the 12th house, which is going deep. It's dreams, it's the archetypal realm, it's your subconscious reality. And you're combining these two energies where you can really visualize things, where you can really see what's going on behind the scenes and behind the veil a lot more easily. And so, this is an energy where you can disconnect a little bit and integrate what you find. Okay. There it is. Aquarius and Aquarius Rising. So for Aquarius Rising, this energy, so all this energy that's happening in Capricorn is in your 12th house, which is the house of endings. It's the house of surrender and letting go. This is already an energy of surrender, loss, letting go, restructuring, and this is really amplified in your 12th house. This is a time when you really be pulled inward, where you might be forced sort of out of the working world, or forced to sort of hide away for a little while, so that way you can do some deep inner work, some contemplation. This is a period where you might be going through some turbulence or some loss of some kind. Even if that's just a loss of your old identity and a shedding of an old skin, it can still be a very intense process for you. There could be potentially some difficult communication that comes in, where there's like a challenge that comes in from the outside, or you have a very challenging message that comes through that causes you to have to sort of go inward, contemplate, to think about what it is that you're doing. This is really a time for Aquarius, though, to be thinking about what do you need to let go of, because you're going to be going through a process of rebirth in the next couple of years. Right now, you're going through this process of surrender, of seclusion, of letting go. And it's very important, right? It's very important for you to take that time. But this is a really great time for you to think about, what are you going to be rebuilding moving forward? Who do you want to be when you come out of this? This is you discovering yourself on the deepest, innermost levels. You might be getting a lot of messages through, things like meditation, visualization, journaling, dreams, signs, synchronicities, all of that. Pay attention to that, because it's showing you not just what you're letting go of, but what's coming, right? What's coming in the future for you. The other energy for Aquarius that's happening is that you have this square going on between Jupiter in your 11th house and Neptune in your 2nd house. And the 2nd house is the house of finance. The 11th house is the house of friends. And so, you might have some sort of fantasy about traveling to visit your friends, to sort of enjoy your social network a little bit more. There might be some fantasies about money and unrealistic expectations about finances that might come up. But this is also a really great time to visualize in those areas, to think about, your ideal when it comes to what you want for your social circle, who you want to connect with, what you want financially, and how maybe you can manifest that in the future. You might not really have the steps to get there yet, but it's a really good time to put together a picture, because you're going to have a very vivid imagination for these things, and you'll have sort of messages and synchronicities and different imagery that'll come to you, maybe even from an outside source, so you can see things from a different perspective in those realms. All right, and then for Pisces and for Pisces Rising, this is the last one. There it is. Okay. So for Pisces and for Pisces Rising, this energy of this stellium in Capricorn is happening in your 11th house, and this can bring a lot of difficult energy as it relates to friends, social networks, the people that you surround yourself with by choice. And this is an area where you're going through a major restructuring. And so with Saturn transiting through Capricorn already, a lot of times when you have a Saturn transit through your 11th house, you end up letting go of certain friendships that are not working for you moving forward. You're restructuring your friendships that you have. And the friendships that do come in, though, are usually very long lasting and very committed. They stand the test of time. A lot of your friendships and your interactions on a group level will be more social interactions through work when you have Saturn in your 11th house. And so a lot of this is being highlighted. So there could be some sort of turbulent or difficult communication coming in through your social networks or your friends where there's some sort of dispute or conflict in that area. This could also be a dispute or a conflict that with, Mercury very soon after coming into a conjunction with Saturn causes you to lose a friendship or to have to really have a hard conversation with somebody that you care about or with a group of people that you care about. So there could be some hard decisions that you have to make this week as it relates to your friends and your social networks. This is also highlighting this Pluto conjunction to the Sun. So this is showing you what you truly need, want, and desire as it relates to your friendships and your social networks, and helping you to align yourself with that energy much more easily, much more clearly. This could also bring up power struggles within your friend group or your social circle. And there's also a need to let go of an old way of behaving with your friends, an old attachment to friendships or groups of people that are past their expiration date and are no longer serving you, so that way you can free up some energy and space moving forward. The other thing that's happening for Pisces and Pisces rising is this Neptune Jupiter square, which is happening in your 10th house of career and public reputation. In your first house, which is the house of you, it's the house of your personality, it's the house of your identity out in the world. And so this is going to be affecting you very personally, especially for those who have Sun, Moon, Rising, and especially Rising near that 14th degree in the sign of Pisces. So anywhere between 12 and 16 degrees will be feeling this the most with this square. And so you might have very idealistic and unrealistic expectations for something that you want to work through or have happen involving your work and what it is that you're putting out there in the world through your career, through your vocation. This could also be unrealistic, like rose-colored glasses when it comes to the work that you're doing or your relationship with bosses or superiors or coworkers. Or having some like big grandiose fantasies about what it is that you're going to be doing with your career goals and plans. That's not necessarily the worst thing, but you might not be seeing things realistically, and you might be confused about what steps to take in order to achieve your long-term goals and plans and to expand on your career and public reputation in the way that you might want to. And so the challenge here is to really picture what you want, to visualize it, even in very idealistic sort of ways, but to be okay with not knowing how it's going to come about right now, because it's going to be very confusing and very difficult for you to see things clearly in that realm. But there is growth happening there. That growth is not going to happen in the way, for Pisces, this might be a little easier to deal with because this is a Neptunian energy and it's about going with the flow. It's about following your intuition, following the signs, allowing things to unfold synchronistically as they will. So for you, this might be an energy that's a little bit easier to deal with because it's not going to come through you pushing something through or you making a very concrete decision. It's going to come through you visualizing something and then allowing it to unfold and following, your intuition or the signs or whatever it is that comes about that guides you in the right direction. And so that's for Pisces and for Pisces rising. All right, everyone. So that was my forecast for all 12 signs. It is another big week. And if you have any questions, comment below. And I always try to do my best to go through and comment back to as many people as possible. And I hope you guys have a really good week. I hope you're able to utilize this energy positively. And just know that this is like a fleeting thing. It's not going to last forever. So if you're having a difficult time, in a couple of weeks, it's really going to lift. And you're going to be coming out of this with a lot of really important change and transformation in your life. That's really going to set the framework for really positive new experiences for the year ahead. It's just kind of getting through this little turbulent period here. So anyway, I hope you all have a really wonderful week. If you want to book a reading with me, you can always do so at the link in the description below. And thank you so much for watching this video and for subscribing to my channel. I couldn't do this without all of you. So I'm very grateful to, have this audience and this platform and to do, this work that I love to do. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.